This is my favorite time of year. I love spring because, everything is budding forth. It's coming forth, new life. It just blows me away. It's just a gorgeous time of year. My backyard is full of flowers and trees that are blooming, and it's fun to watch. But I also have allergies, so all of the pollen affects me. So if you hear me sniffling, it's not because I'm crying or because I'm bored. It's simply because the allergies, it can become overwhelming from time to time. But in the beginning, God had a plan. He had a big plan, and no substantial work is ever completed, and it doesn't begin without a plan. I've worked in construction nearly all my adult life. I worked in the field. I was a carpenter. I worked as an electrician and did many other trades and participated in those trades. And then for the past 35 years, I've been an estimator for general construction. I sit all day long. I look at drawings. I look at plans. We call the drawings plans. They're the plans on how a building is going to be built. And I tear them apart. I look at all the little details, a detail of how a window is flashed so that water doesn't creep into that window and get the house wet or the building wet. Door details, concrete reinforcing details, reinforcing for masonry, or you might call them concrete blocks. How lumber is connected, connection details, steel details. That's all I look at, and I count them, count parts and pieces. Then I apply prices to them, and I determine how much it's going to cost to build that building. But I look at these plans; they're amazing. An architect puts them together. They're fully detailed with the goal of somebody occupying or utilizing that structure, occupying that structure. God also had a plan, and it wasn't haphazard. It was full of detail, complete in every way. And then in construction, if you make mistakes in the foundation at the beginning, you know where it shows up at? Well, really throughout the building process, but really in the roof. That's where the mistakes show up. Because if your foundation is out of square, the roof is going to look horrible. It will not square up, and everybody sees it. You can hide some of the other mistakes as you go up, as you build up, but not the roof. The roof reflects the mistakes that are made in the foundation. You can't afford those mistakes. Every aspect of the construction has to be accurate. Has to be, we call it plumb, square, and level. Has to be plumb. It has to be square, has to be level. But during a construction project, many times this happens. You run into an unforeseen situation, an uncovered obstruction, something that you did not anticipate. Maybe you're digging and there's a huge boulder in the ground. Where I live, that can easily happen. Bedrock is only a few feet deep, 8 at the most. And, you can find glacier till boulders in the ground, not very deep. You run into that. Well, you didn't expect to find that. You expect to dig clearly and be able to easily dig your foundation. So you find and other, obstructions and unforeseen incidents you occur, especially when you're remodeling a building. And when that happens, the architect will issue an addendum or a bulletin. He modifies the construction process. He modifies his plan to accommodate this unforeseen situation, this unforeseen obstruction. It's called an addendum or a bulletin or a change order. That happens in almost every construction project. But at the beginning, God had a plan, and his plan was full of details. He left no detail undone, and it was complete and perfect in every way. And we see that starting in Genesis chapter 2. And we're going to start with verse 4. The heading there in the REV says man and woman in the garden. And I think that's pretty poignant. But in verse 4, it says, this is the history of the heavens and of the earth when they were created in the day that Yahweh God made the earth and the heavens. This is the history. Well, that history is spelled out specifically in chapters 1, verse 1 through chapter 2, verse 3. That's the history. These 7 days that are recorded in those verses. But it's interesting, the perfection of the order of those 7 days and what occurs in those 7 days. Remember, I told you it was full of details. God's plan was full of details, just like the drawings that I look at. They're gorgeous. They're beautiful. When you pick them apart, it's amazing what an architect can do. God is the greatest architect, in the cosmos. And it's full of detail. For instance, God could not rest until all of the work was done, right? Same with building a building. You start your construction project, you can't stop. You have to see it to completion. There are consequences if you stop. Rain and snow and multitude of consequences if you stop. In fact, the Bible talks about that. Jesus mentioned it in Luke chapter 14. He says, remember the guy, he lays the foundation of the house, but he didn't count the cost. He runs out of money with the foundation done, and he has to wait till he gets more money. The foundation just sits there, and everybody laughs at him. Oh, look at this guy. He couldn't even finish his job. I've gone past construction projects that have sat dormant for a long period of time, and I'm like, somebody made a huge mistake. Somebody blew it somewhere along the line because this project's not moving forward, right? God could not rest until no break time. Couldn't have break time, no coffee breaks until all of the work was done. That was day 7. And then God's work wasn't complete until Adam and Eve were created, because they were the purpose of the creation. Well, that was day 6. But before man could live on the earth, there had to be livestock and creeping things. I love the way the scriptures say that, creeping things. That includes so many things, creeping things, animals to support mankind and to fertilize the garden, right? Bees for pollination of the plants, to make honey for eating, milk and cheese, and many other purposes for all of the livestock and the creeping things that God created. That was also day 6. That happened before man and Adam and Eve were created, because they had to be there to support Adam and Eve. But before the animals could survive and be sustained, there needed to be food for them as well as for man. Birds to move seed around. That's one of the great things that birds do. They spread seed. Fish for food. Fish is one of the highest protein foods that a person can eat. It's great, clean protein. I know that they do more than that, but that's just some of the things that the animals for birds and all that. But that's day 5 if you look at day 5 in detail. And for man and animals, birds, fish, and creeping things to survive on the earth, there needed to be order, a clock, a calendar to govern their lives for seasons and times, the moon to control the tides, the sun to regulate temperature and seasons. That's day 4. There also needed to be food for all species on the earth and materials for survival for building structures and shelters, for building nests and dens, material for fire, fungi, flowers, protein, or pollen. That's day 3. But before plant life could thrive on the earth, there needed to be dry land and sources of water. That's also day 3. However, before there could be order to the water and before there could be dry land, water had to exist. Water is essential to life. Without it, you can't live. A man can go, I think the maximum is 7 days without water, 7 hours or thereabouts without shelter. 70 days, I believe, is the maximum without food. There had to be water in order for the next step to exist, and then the next step, and then the next step. That was day 2. And then without light, nothing can exist. There has to be light for everything to exist. Even in the darkest places on the earth, there's minuscule amounts of light, like phosphorus is a source of light. There's other sources of light. Even in the deep of the sea, there are fish that produce light. Nothing can exist without God or without light. And then God said on day 1, let there be light. And he separated the light from darkness. It's absolutely beautiful structure, one upon the next, to get to where the creation was complete. There's a great group of people. They're all scientists, all fantastic in their disciplines, out in San Diego, California. They've written oodles and oodles of books, and they're beautifully done, and they will inspire you. They'll also cause you to think. And I don't agree with everything they write, but they will really inspire you in many ways. And the name of the outfit is called the Institute for Creation Research. Dr. Henry Morris started the Institute for Creation Research. They produced this little booklet. They've got booklets and books galore, but this one's called 6 Days of Creation. And it's beautiful. And it lays out the 6 days in Genesis in such a gorgeous way. And I think it would really bless you. But you can find them on the internet, the Institute for Creation Research. Again, they're out of San Diego, California. So God had this plan, and he had the details of the plan, and he instituted the details perfectly, and he built it in proper order, just like a building has to be built. Foundation first, and then you build up from there. Light first, and then God built everything from there for the end purpose. We're back in Genesis 2, verse 5. Before any shrub of the field was in the earth, and before any plant of the field had sprung up, for Yahweh had not caused it to rain on the earth, and there was no man to till the ground. A mist went up from the earth and watered the whole face of the ground. And Yahweh God formed man of the dust of the ground, and he breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. There is the end purpose of everything God created, from the creation of the heavens and the earth down all the way down to day 6. This is the purpose. This is the purpose of God's plan. Remember, I said when you build a building, the goal is to have people in it, whether it's a house or an office or a hospital or a school, doesn't matter. Or if it's a bridge that you're building, the purpose of the bridge is to have people traveling over. Everything that you build the purpose is to help mankind, for people. Everything God did was for man, for mankind, for Janet, for Regina, for Wenz, for Ron and Jan, for all of us. for mankind. The whole cosmos exists for that. That is the purpose of the creation. Let's go on, verse 8. And Yahweh God had planted a garden in the east. Remember, when you read in the Bible is Israel-centric, meaning Israel is the center of attention in the Bible. That's why you don't read about the United States of America, or you don't read about Great Britain, or you don't read about Kenya, or you don't read about Australia. It's all Israel-centric. And so in the east, when Moses wrote this, he's referring to east of the promised land, east of Israel. Doesn't specifically say, but it mentions these 4 rivers. We'll read that. And there he put the man whom he had formed. He put the man in this garden. And if you read it, if you look in the commentary, it's like the garden of God's delight, this beautiful garden that God had prepared. And he puts man in there. In verse 9, Yahweh God had made every kind of tree that is pleasant to the sight and good for food to spring up from the ground, and the tree of life in the midst of the garden, and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And a river went out of Eden to water the garden. So this garden is fairly large. It's a fairly large place. And from there, it divided and became 4 headwaters. The name of the first is Pishon. It winds through the whole land of Havilah, where there is gold, and the gold of that land is good. Bdellium, which is incense, resin that comes from specific types of trees. And when it's dried, then you burn it, and it produces incense. It produces gorgeous smells. And the onyx stone are there. We don't know where this Havilah is, but if you can find a specific spot that has really good gold and this bdellium and onyx in it in great quantities, it might be there. It might not, but it's somewhere in the east of Israel, or the promised land. The name of the second is Gihon. It winds through the whole land of Cush. Well, Cush was understood as being Ethiopia, but originally these rivers could have been in a different location. It could have moved, because with the flood of Noah, a lot of things happened, changed, our geography changed. We'll read about that in Psalm 104. The mountains rose and valleys appeared, and the waters rushed back into those valleys. It was very tumultuous. And so landscape changed. So some of these rivers may have changed course. And maybe they didn't. But the name of the third was Hiddekel. That is known to be the Tigris, presently the Tigris. But again, its course could have been modified. It runs east of Assyria, so we can locate that. Tigris is still over east of Assyria, where Assyria was. And the 4th river is the Euphrates. The Euphrates and the Tigris are really close together. You can look on a map and find them. So anyway, this garden of God's delight, where he puts Adam, is in that location. So it's a sizable area, this garden, but the garden didn't cover the entire earth. Plants did, right? God made trees and foliage and all that to spring up out of the ground. But the garden wasn't all over the earth yet. Yahweh took the man and he put him into the garden for a purpose, to work it and to care for it. And when I read this not too long ago, I thought, wow, that hit me really, really hard. And I said, Dennis, do you have a responsibility to the creation? And the answer was, yeah, Dennis, you do. Man was put here to work it and care for it. We have a responsibility to utilize the resources that God put here and utilize them responsibly, but to utilize them. That's why they're here. Coal, oil, natural gas, minerals, salt. The list is endless. All of the resources that God put on this earth was for mankind to utilize in life, but to utilize responsibly, to recycle and dispose of properly, absolutely. To cultivate the land properly, yep. And the Bible talks about giving the land rest. I forget how many years it is. I knew it. It's either 7 or 3 or 5. It's an odd number.
Every 7 years.
7. Michelle holds up her fingers. I believe that she's right, and Mina too. You don't just plant and then plant and then plant and then plant and then plant and be greedy and extract everything out of the soil. God says, give the land rest. Let it refresh itself. I have a really good friend that lives down the road from where I just sold my house, Ron Humberger. He's a wonderful soul. He and his wife live there, and he follows that religiously, absolutely all the time. He will leave one of his fields fallow every year, and he just rotates around. He follows it. He lets the land rest. That's cultivating properly. We're also responsible to beautify it. As man, as human, as population would have grown in the Garden of Eden, as population grew, it would have outgrown the garden. So what were they supposed to do? Expand it. Expand the garden. Beautify, move it out, beautify, have more kids, build more population, because God told Adam and Eve to fill the earth. Fill the earth. Well, the garden's not going to handle that many people. They're going to have to build the garden, expand the garden, make it bigger, make it beautiful, the way that they would want it. The way that, you want apple tree, you really love apple trees, plant a bazillion of them. You like flowers like Mina does, plant your whole yard in flowers, beautify it, and do that unto the Lord. Also, are we supposed to take care of living things, the creatures, animals, the things that creep on the earth, birds, fish? Yeah, feed them. In the wintertime here in Ohio, it can be harsh. It can be rough. I make sure I have corn. I throw the corn out for the squirrels. I got bird feeders. I got a hummingbird feeder right now. I don't know who's stealing all the hummingbird nectar, because I haven't seen a hummingbird at it yet, but it's almost empty. So I'm not really sure what's going on there. But yeah, to take care of, to respect, and hunters, when they hunt, they should hunt with respect. And every hunter I know does that. Hunting is I used to hunt a lot. I don't anymore. But hunting is almost a religious experience, a spiritual experience. And it is very humbling to hunt and to harvest that animal. And you do that with great respect. It's not fun, just fun and games. I mean, it's enjoyable, yes, but you do it with respect, the respect that animal deserves. At Proverbs 12:10, we're not going to go there, but you can write it down. Proverbs 12:10 says, "The righteous person cares for the life of his animals, but the compassions of the wicked are cruel." We have animals, horses. We don't treat horses with disrespect and beat them, or cattle, or our sheep, or our goats, or any of that. We treat them with respect. That's part of our responsibility to the creation. To utilize the resources properly, our coal, our water, solar, wind, nuclear, all of it. None of it is evil. None of it is bad. We utilize it properly. and respectfully. But there's a big lie, lots of big lies. Every day we're attacked, especially regarding our responsibility to the creation. We're attacked. We're made to feel guilty, made to feel, sinful, made to feel wasteful. And we're, by these lies, the design is to dissuade you from the truth. Sure, a big lie. A big lie. The German words for big lie are gross Lüge. It's a gross distortion of or misrepresentation of the truth, used especially as a propaganda technique. The German expression was coined by none other than Adolf Hitler, which he dictated, or he coined it when he dictated his book, Mein Kampf, in 1925, to describe the use of a lie so colossal that no one would believe that someone could have the impudence to distort the truth so infamously. So that lie, that is so big, that can't be a lie. It's that big of a lie. He said, you tell a big enough lie, loud enough, long enough, and people will eventually believe it is the truth. In school, like before the dinosaurs roamed, when I was back in school, we were told that we were going to go through a second ice age. It scared me to death. I'm not kidding you. I pondered that. How in the world am I supposed to survive an ice age? How's that going to happen? What's going to happen to my mom, my dad, my sister, my friends? An ice age. I knew what an ice age was. Of course, what they told me it was in science class. Oh, this is going to happen in 20 years. 20 years, we'd all be under 100 feet of ice. Big glaciers in my backyard. Right? That was a lie. It wasn't even based on true science. It was a lie. Did it happen? No, I'm almost 70 years old. No, there hasn't been an ice age. How about a new one? We're all going to die because of global warming, climate change. You're all going to die. It's going to heat up. The earth will turn into the sun and fry everybody. Come on, that's just the reverse of the ice age. We're all going to die because of global greenhouse gas. Yeah, there's greenhouse gas. I'm not sure it's doing what they say, what they claim it's doing. It's called CO2. Plants breathe it. We exhale it. Ask somebody sometime that is arguing with this, ask them this. Well, how do you feel about the overabundance of argon in our atmosphere now? See what they said. Oh, yeah, we should get rid of that too. We breathe argon every day. It's an inert gas. It's the third most abundant gas in our atmosphere. Ask them about, I think it's called dihydrogen monoxide. Bad, right? Bad. Oh, yeah. That's called water. They're lies to cause you to fear. I'll tell you why they're lies. Mankind is not going to destroy the planet. Not even possible. We're not going to destroy the planet. We're not going to turn it into a fiery ball. Psalm 104, verse 5, if you want to look at that one. Keep your finger here in Genesis. That's Psalm 104.5, I was going to say. 104, verse 5. He, God, established the earth upon its foundations. It will not be shaken forever. Man's not going to undo the work of the Creator. The only destroying of the earth that's going to take place, it's going to be by God himself. Maybe people, not you all, but maybe people out there need to contemplate that a little bit. That might be a little more important. We're not going to run out of resources. We're not going to run out of coal. We're not going to run out of oil. We're not going to run out of minerals. We're not going to run out of fresh water. We're not going to run out of animals. The sun's not going to go dark in our time. Aliens are not going to attack us, and the sky is not going to fall. Not going to happen. The Lord established it on its foundations. There's a great book. I love books. I hated them growing up. In high school and all that, I hated them. Once I started learning the Bible, I fell in love with books. There's an author named, he's passed away now, but Michael Crichton. Maybe you've heard of him. He wrote realistic fiction. So it's fiction based on real things. And the greatest of his works, as far as I'm concerned, is his book called State of Fear. It looks like this, State of Fear. It's the only fiction book you'll ever find that is footnoted. And the footnotes are not made up. They're real footnotes. And it's all about global warming. It's a fabulous read. It's a great fiction book, but it also reveals a lot of truth. I encourage you to grab a copy of it. You can find it on Amazon. It's a great book. So, no, we're not going to destroy the earth. Go to Genesis chapter 8 real quick. Genesis 8, verse 20. Noah built an altar. This is after Noah and his family come out of the ark, right? They've been in the ark for almost a year. And they finally come out of the ark. And Noah built an altar to Yahweh and took every clean animal and every clean bird and offered burnt offerings on the altar. Yahweh smelled the pleasant aroma. Yahweh said in his heart, I will never again curse the ground because of humankind, because the imagination of people's heart is evil from their youth, nor will I ever again strike every living thing as I have done. While the earth remains, seed time and harvest. Now remember, while the earth remains, it's established on its foundation. It will not be moved, shaken forever, God said. While the earth remains, seed time and harvest, and cold and heat, and summer and winter, and day and night will not cease. So no, we're not going to go into an ice age. And no, we're not going to turn into the second sun in this solar system. There's a lot of other verses you can read about this stuff. Nehemiah 9:6, Psalm 115:1, Psalm 24:1, Psalm 89:11, John 1:3. All say basically the same thing. It's God's planet. He owns it. He has watched over it. He has established it. How are you and I going to destroy it? That's pretty egotistical to even think that I can. Take a look at Psalm 104, back to Psalm 104. This is a gorgeous psalm. I'm going to read through this fairly quick, but think about this, about this psalm. It's praising God as the creator for what he did. Verse 6, you covered it with the deep like a garment. The waters stood above the mountains. At your rebuke they fled. At the sound of your thunder, they hurried away. The mountains rose. The valleys sank down to a place that you established for them. This is talking about the flood. It's referring to the flood and the aftermath of the flood. You have set a boundary that they may not pass over the waters. They will not return to cover the earth. So if the ice cap melts, both of them, it's not going to cover the earth. You can, there's, it ain't possible. Ain't gonna happen. They give drink to every animal of the field. The wild donkeys quench their thirst. The birds of heaven dwell above them. They lift their voices among the branches. He waters the mountains from his upper chambers. The earth is satisfied with the fruit of your works. It's so beautiful. He waters the earth. He makes the rain to fall on the just and the unjust alike. He causes the grass to grow. Why? For the cattle, and plants for man to tend. There you go, back to the garden. Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. If you know that song. So that he may bring forth food from the earth, that man can. Wine that makes glad the heart of man. Oil to make his face to shine. The food that strengthens the heart of man. The trees of Yahweh are satisfied. The cedars of Lebanon that he has planted. Have you ever seen the great sequoias? I know Dave and Carol have. Great sequoias out in California. They are majestic. I don't know any other word. You feel like an ant standing next to these things. They're monsters of trees. The root systems are as big around as most trees that I've ever seen. They're massive. Their acorn is about that big. The seeds within that acorn produces trees that massive. Who can design that? And the trees cannot survive by themselves. You can't have a sequoia just growing out in a field somewhere because they're supported by the root systems of the trees next to them. It's an entire community, colony of trees. Who can think that through? Only God. Where the birds nest, even the stork whose home is in the firs. The high mountains are for the wild goats. The cliffs are a refuge for the rock badgers. He made the moon for seasons. The sun knows the place of its setting. You make darkness and it becomes night when all the forest animals prowl. The young lions roar after their prey and seek their food from God. The sun rises and they withdraw and they lay down in their dens. Man goes forth to his work and to his labor until evening. O Yahweh, how many are your works? By wisdom have you made them all. The earth is full of your possessions. There is the sea, great and spread out, in which are innumerable swarms, both small and large animals. There the ships sail, and Leviathan, which you created in order to play with. These all look to you to give them food in due season. You give it to them. They gather it up. You open your hand, they are satisfied with good. You hide your face, they're terrified. You take away their breath, they die, and they return to the dust. You send forth your spirit, they are created, and you renew the face of the ground. May the glory of Yahweh endure forever. May Yahweh rejoice in his works. He looks at the earth and it trembles. He touches the mountains and they make smoke. I will sing to Yahweh as long as I live. I will make music to my God while I have any being. May my meditation be pleasing to him. I will rejoice in Yahweh. May sinners perish from the earth, and may the wicked be no more. Bless Yahweh, O my soul. Praise Yah. The earth is his creation, and everything in it belongs to Yahweh. It's his handiwork, and it's all here for the support and a part of his plan. Its foundation upon which it is the foundation upon which stands his building. His building sits on this creation. Back to Genesis 2. Guess what that building might be? Think about that. Genesis 2, verse 16. Yahweh, God, commanded the man, saying, from every tree of the garden you may eat, yes, eat. But from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, you must not eat from it. For in the day that you eat from it, you will die, yes, die. Yahweh God said, it is not good for the man to be alone. I'm going to make him a helper, corresponding to him. Yahweh God had formed out of the ground every animal of the field and every bird of heaven and brought them to man to see what he would call them and to check out maybe they could be, this helper corresponding to man. All these animals, elephants, tigers, bears. Oh my. Whatever the man called each living soul, that's what its name was. The man gave names to all the livestock, to all the birds of the heaven, to every animal of the field. But for Adam, there was not found a helper corresponding to him. Yahweh caused a deep sleep to fall on the man. As he slept, he took took one of his ribs, or out behind the rib or beside the rib, not really sure exactly how that should be translated, and closed up the flesh at its spot. And Yahweh God built the rib that he had taken. It's a gorgeous way to translate that. God built the rib that he had taken out from man into a woman, not a bro. He didn't make Adam a bro. Why not? Could have had a bro to hang with, play games with, throw baseball, play catch, go fishing with. Didn't make him a bro, a woman, and brought her to the man. Notice too, it doesn't say that God breathed into her nostrils the breath of life. It says he built her out of the rib. I just think that's an interesting omission there. You can contemplate on that. The man said, this one at last is bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. This one will be called woman because she was taken out of man. It's part of his plan, part of the blueprint, part of the plans for man to have a companion and for them to procreate and fill the earth and expand the garden and to care for it and to work it. This is why, verse 24, it's not one of the reasons. This is why. This is the reason a man will leave his father and his mother and will join with his wife, and they will become one flesh. And they were both naked, the man and his wife, and were not ashamed. There's God's plan. Now procreate, fill the earth. Let me fellowship with you. Let me live with you. Let me walk in the garden with you. That's what Yahweh wanted. And we know the rest of the story, how man fell from that position. And now we live in a fallen world. His original plan was to have people living on the earth that he could commune with, fellowship with, people who would love and obey him, people that he could love and care for, a family to share all of his love with. Man rebelled. So what did God do? He instituted an amendment, a bulletin, a change order. It was an unforeseen situation. It was an obstruction. Man didn't see this coming. So he institutes an amendment. And that amendment, that change order, shows up in Genesis 3:14. Yahweh said, God said to the serpent, because you've done this, You are cursed above all livestock and above every animal of the field. On your belly you will go, and you will eat dust all the days of your life. I will put a hostility between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. He, her seed, will strike your head, and you will strike his heel. They had this addendum, and the addendum carried forth. And we had to throw in a new addendum, another addendum a little later on, because all of mankind had become so wicked that every imagination of the heart of every man was only evil all the time. Genesis chapter 6 or 7. So we have the flood. We start all over with Noah and his family, a new addendum. But that addendum carried forth with the original addendum to bring forth the Messiah, so that mankind could get back to the garden, so that God once again could have an earth, a garden full of people, children that loved him, that wanted to love him, that wanted to walk in the garden with him. That's why Ephesians says, chapter 1, verse 13. Oh, we can't read it. Yeah, we can read it all real quick. Blessed be the God and the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, who has blessed us in union with Christ with every spiritual blessing in the heavenly places, just as he chose us in him before the foundation of the world to be holy and without blemish in his presence in love, having decided in advance that we would be adopted through Jesus Christ for himself, according to the pleasure of his will, for the praise of the glory of his grace, which he graciously gave us in the beloved one, in whom we have redemption through his blood. There's the amendment. There's the bulletin, the change order being, coming to pass. For forgiveness of our transgressions, according to the riches of his grace, which he lavished on us with all wisdom and insight, having made known to us the sacred secret of his will, according to his good pleasure, that he planned beforehand in him, Christ, with a view towards the administration of the fullness of times, to unite under one head all things in Christ, the things in the heavens and the things on the earth in him, in whom we also were claimed as God's possession, having been decided upon in advance according to the purpose of the one who is working all things according to the plan of his will, to the end that he who had already hoped in Christ would be to the praise of his glory, in whom you also, when you heard the message of truth, when you heard the song, I believe I can fly, when you heard the message of truth, the good news of your salvation, and when you believed in him, you were sealed with the promised Holy Spirit, which is the guarantee of our inheritance, our part of the garden, until the redemption of God's own purchased possession, to the praise of his glory. God had a plan, and you are the purpose, the reason for the plan. Isn't that awesome? It's awesome. So go forth, spread your wings, and fly.